Did you know that with appropriate supervision, most accidents and incidents that occur in childcare programs can be avoided? In this session titled A+ Supervision, you will learn to recognize common situations that pose risks to children, and you will learn proactive measures to ensure safety in childcare programs through appropriate supervision practices. As a teacher, think for a moment about what your most important responsibility is. I'll give you a moment to consider. For every teacher, the most important responsibility would be to keep children safe. Parents would not trust their children to your care if they first didn't feel that their child would be in safekeeping. I'm assuming that you answered previously with answers such as supervise, remove hazards, reduce risks, and so forth. Let's see how often these answers come up in the upcoming session. Today we will talk about the importance of supervision before it is too late. This A+ supervision session has been designed to assist providers with the expectations of licensing rules and regulations. It is very straightforward, but the most important thing is that it sticks and that you get it. On May 7, 2007, a 6th grade child with special needs was left on a Charlotte-Mecklenburg school bus for 7 hours. The mom worked all day feeling confident that her child was at school. Consider this tragic event as you wear other people's shoes and work through the following 3 questions. First, what is the reaction of the community? Think about that. Stop the video for a moment and take some time to fill this in your workbook. Next, what is the reaction of the parent? Stop the video again and take a moment to fill in your thoughts in the workbook. And last, what is the reaction of this bus driver? Stop again and fill in your thoughts. This exercise is intended to help you understand the depth of feeling and consequences that occur as a result of an incident like this. An important point that could be made that an event like this can happen to even the very best teacher. The definition of supervise can encompass either of or both of the following. To oversee an activity. To watch over an activity or a task being carried out by someone and ensure it is done correctly. To oversee people, to be in charge of a group of people engaged in an activity or a task and keep order or ensure that they perform it correctly. How do we modify this to fit supervision of children? Don't both of these definitions fit what we do on a daily basis with children? The trick is that we have to do them both concurrently. As we move forward, please note this session's agenda. We've already discussed what supervision is and defined it as it relates to our work in early childhood. We're going to discuss North Carolina law and break it down into parts so that it really makes an impression. We will discuss when the most common situations occur that may cause a lapse in supervision. And we'll break down parts of the day and classroom events where we must be on high alert for issues concerning supervision. These will include the indoor environment, a child's typical development, feeding and meal times, nap times, the playground and outdoor environment, and transportation. Did you know? Statistics show that we don't know this very well. Simple routine activities have gone very wrong because of poor supervision. Inadequate supervision can lead to unwanted incidents that sometimes result in abuse and neglect investigations. Let's move forward and discuss the law and how it relates to supervision in childcare. Based on child care rules and regulations, adequate supervision means that staff interact with the children while moving about the indoor and outdoor area and are able to hear and see the children at all times except when emergencies necessitate that direct supervision is impossible for brief periods of time. Let's take this statement and break it down into bits. The first word that jumps out is that word interact. Notice that according to the way the law is written, supervision is interactive. Supervision doesn't mean that we can stand over children and only observe what is happening. It means that staff interact with the children while moving about the indoor and outdoor area. We're going to go back to that slide, but we'll take a sidebar here while we dig deeper and discover how the law defines interaction. The law says attending to children in a positive, nurturing, and appropriate manner with consideration of each child's developmental needs. So yes, join the children in their play. Have discussions with them. Monitor their play and their conversations. Guide their language and learning. Meet their needs, all while supervising. Now, back to that original part of the law that we were discussing. The next part of the law mentions that during your interactive supervision, you are able to hear and see the children at all times. This means pay attention, not only to the children you are interacting with in the moment, but be aware of all the children. Rather than sitting or standing with your back to children, move to an angle where you can observe all of the children from across the room if needed. Need to tie a shoe? Turn around so that you can bend over and still see the entire group. Here is the next important word in this statement, emergencies. It states, except when emergencies necessitate that direct supervision is impossible for brief periods of time. What emergencies can you think of? An emergency under this definition would mean that someone is in imminent danger, meaning at a risk of losing life or limb. Needing to go to the bathroom does not constitute an emergency. These are events that should be planned for so that they do not become emergencies. So that part of the law is broken down for you into very clear terms. Remember, interact, hear and see, and emergencies. When we know better, we do better. We can't discuss interactions with children unless we also discuss what the law says about staff-child ratio. Staff-child ratio refers to the maximum number of children which may be supervised by one staff member in a child care center or a group of children in a child care center. The number of staff members required for each group of children is determined by the age of the children in the group. Group size is important. If the group size is too large, it will be difficult to adequately supervise them to the extent of what we previously discussed as it relates to the law. Always know your ratios and follow them carefully. It is a part of your supervision duties and is important for helping you to keep your children safe. Note that there are times when staff-child ratio may not be adequate to protect children. Those times will come up later in our discussions. Now let's talk about some common risk-filled situations where there could be a lack of supervision. You will see that these are ordinary events that could happen to any of us without thinking carefully. Preoccupied teachers. You see here 2 teachers in the classroom in ratio, but clearly not even aware that both of their backs are turned to several of the children. Both teachers are engaged, one talking on the phone while the other participates in whatever is probably taking place with that phone conversation. Teachers often find themselves doing something like this, or perhaps talking amongst each other, not considering that it only takes a moment for a supervision disaster to occur in those moments. These teachers are likely very good at their jobs, but can still easily lapse with supervision. Another reminder that it can happen to the best of teachers. Overratio. This can happen especially at drop-off and pickup times. Ratios are important to be able to meet the needs of the children. You are responsible for guarding your ratios carefully. Too many children make it difficult to supervise the children in the manner described by law. A lapse in supervision that results in an investigation will raise the question of ratios. Don't put yourself at risk. Staff not feeling well. If you are not feeling well, either physically or emotionally, you will not be on your game at work. It will affect job performance, and you don't want to cheat the children out of your best you. Poor job performance can result in disastrous results. Stay home, get well, and then dust yourself off and get back in the game, playing at 100%. Communication is a big deal, and poor communication puts everyone at risk. A lack of communication can result in one adult thinking the other adult was responsible for the child. Make clear handoffs. I stress this point. Make your handoffs very clear. If you leave at the end of the day, know how many children are in your care and how many you are passing along and to whom. Count them, name to face, and have the receiving teacher do the same. This makes it clear that the handoff is completed and you are free to go without worry. If you step away from the group, even for a moment, make it clear to the receiving teacher how many children you have and who you have, and vice versa. She should know who and how many she has. Be sure that parents make it clear at arrival and departure times that they are there and that they have taken possession of their children or child. A lack of communication has resulted in children being left behind because one person thought the other was in charge. Never assume. Always talk about it. When new children enter the group, know that it takes most children at least 2 weeks to get used to a new environment, and many may take longer and need more attention. Don't assume that the child knows the routines or knows when or how to line up or where they are going. There are many new things to distract a new child, and you could very well walk a line of children out of the classroom, leaving a child behind because they just didn't know what they were supposed to do. This also leads back to communication. Be sure that children learn and know the routines and sequence of events. Likewise, having a new or a substitute teacher in the room who is unfamiliar with the children can be a risk. Having unfamiliar children come and go can be overwhelming to a new teacher, and not knowing who the child is or where the child belongs can lead to a supervisory event. Staff should look out for one another and help new teachers become familiar with children. Transportation is a big deal when children are involved. Like our opening story about the child who was left on the bus, there are hundreds of stories that deal with transportation and a lapse in supervision. We'll be talking about this later, but know that this is another very big risk factor. Any teacher can tell you how chaotic transitions can be. When children are coming and going, that is a prime time for accidents to happen. It is important that we always know who is coming and going and where the child or children are at all times. Signing them in and out each day and every time, and always checking face to name, is critical to prevent losing a child in the mix. Rules must be explained. Unless a child is told, they may not know that they cannot run out of a classroom or go anywhere by themselves. After all, at home, they are likely to be allowed to be left alone to play in their bedroom, or can be left in another room in the house while parents are cooking dinner. Don't assume that the child knows that the rules are different when they are in the classroom, and remember that children often have to have rules explained to them over and over again. Make a list of simple rules and discuss them often. Also, new staff may not always know the rules. A young, unexperienced, untrained teacher may not know that she cannot leave the children alone, or she may not have yet learned about ratios. And then we come to the environment. The environment plays a big part in supervision, and there can be risks associated with the environment. We'll go into depth about the environment next. Consider that you are planning an indoor environment from scratch. Stop this video for a moment and use your workbook to list all of the safety issues you must think about when planning the indoor environment. Be sure to differentiate between planning for infants and toddlers or older children. And then, let's see if any of your responses come up in discussion. The arrangement of the physical space is very important for safety in childcare. The best way to keep children safe is with constant visual supervision. Plan or adapt the spaces in the facility so staff can see and hear all children at all times. Remember that infants and toddlers should be cared for in separate spaces away from older children. You will need adequate space for very young children's activities, space for feeding, napping, active play, quiet play, diapering, and toileting. And when planning these areas, think about preventative measures to provide safe but stimulated learning. Remember that exploring and learning go hand in hand. For younger children, such as infants and toddlers, room arrangement should be planned with more open spaces to prevent crowding, since they do not have the language skills needed to tell their peers to give them space and to help them move more freely. For older children, room arrangement with centers should be more defined, making it easier for them to manage their play in smaller groups. There are other reasons for being aware of the room arrangement that will come up later when we discuss children's typical development. Materials are, of course, important. Items should be developmentally appropriate and appropriate for the desired age group. Giving small children toys with small parts that they can easily choke on, or leaving messy paints and markers within their reach can make supervision hard to manage. Other safety issues to be aware of when planning an environment. Use approved gates or doors to close off stairways that lead to basements, upper floors, and other levels. Continually check to see that all gates and doors are closed. Kitchen, laundry, and storage areas are not safe for children. To keep curious children from wandering or following staff members into these areas, you might install half doors with safety latches or locks. This will let you see the children at all times while protecting them from dangers. Be prepared to make a quick exit. Sometimes you may need to get children out of the facility very quickly. It is best to have 2 exits from each room. One exit should have direct ground level access to the outdoors for an evacuation crib. Mark these exits, post an evacuation plan, and check that these doors are not locked. Have adequate storage for supplies and belongings. You will need spaces for clothing, diapers, bedding, toys, and games. Plan for ample storage areas so you can keep all necessary items close at hand in the classroom. Never leave children unsupervised while you get supplies. Teachers also need space to store their personal things. Make sure that storage areas are locked or cannot be reached by curious toddlers. As we begin talking about the typical development of children, we think of those action verbs that indicate development: crawling, walking, biting, running, etc. Infants at certain ages are beginning to crawl and are known for putting everything in their mouths. This therefore means that we need to think about things that are at their level that may put them at risk. Something that we may overlook could be the small rubber tip of a door stopper. A crawling child could remove this rubber tip and then it becomes a choking hazard as it goes into their mouth. Take a child's eye view and consider these things and other items that could be a danger to children who are close to the floor. Older infants and toddlers are learning to walk. As their mobility increases, so do the safety hazards. They fall often. This is why planning a room arrangement with wide open spaces are important. It is also important to be aware of furniture with sharp edges because of this reason. Older toddlers and 2-year-olds are becoming more independent. Biting often occurs at this stage of development. Sometimes the reason for this is that language is not yet developed to a point where they can say what they want to say. This is another good reason to have a more open environment. If children become crowded in an enclosed space and they cannot say, "Hey, move out of my way," they may react with a chomp on their friend's arm. As we move along to the older preschool ages, we know that they are risk takers. This is why we supervise rough play and pay attention to them as they use scissors or wrestle with their friends. We also plan for the classroom centers to be more defined and for a more closed-in room arrangement to discourage running, which is a stage of development that we find hard to keep up with. All of these show examples of typical stages of development at different ages. This is a reminder that with changing development comes the responsibility for adults to protect children from what comes naturally to children. The key point here is that safe supervision begins with the physical arrangement of the room. So plan ahead when designing or redesigning an environment, but be proactive. Go ahead and allow for plenty of movement and physical exploration, but be sure it happens in a safe environment. And so, besides the physical arrangement of the classroom, what else can you actively do to keep children safe in the classroom? You can always ensure that your staff-child ratio is adequate. You can make sure that all areas of the room can be seen. You can be sure to separate all adult materials from child materials, and you can prepare activities ahead of time and have materials ready. Let's talk now about feeding and meal times. Be sure to visually supervise children while they are eating, and note that infants and toddlers should be in arm's reach when eating or drinking. Work to limit the number of children fed by one adult at one time. The best practice is 1-to-1, especially for infants. If this is not possible, try not to have more than 3 infants being fed by one caregiver. Be sure to provide drinking water at frequent intervals during the day to help with digestion. Be aware that sticky or small pieces of food may cause choking. Some of the foods to avoid are candy, chips, corn, grapes, gum, hot dogs, nuts, peanut butter, popcorn, pretzels, and raisins. And be cautious about hot liquids and burns with children. Sadly, children have been badly burned when water from an overturned crock pot or a hot beverage spilled on them. The classroom is no place for a hot cup of coffee or hot liquids of any kind. Be sure to ask about food and other allergies. Post a list as a quick reference and check for all of the children in your care. You wouldn't want an allergic reaction to occur because of anyone's neglect to check. Follow infant meal patterns closely and check bottle labels. Pay attention that the right child gets the right bottle. It can be frightening for the wrong child to be fed someone else's breast milk. Now we'll discuss napping. Caregivers must stay alert during nap time and check on the children regularly. Check especially for regular breathing, overheating, and a change in color. Pay attention to items that may be within reach of children during nap times and guard against choking and strangulation hazards. Remove bibs from infant and toddlers' necks before napping. Never use pacifiers with strings around the child's neck. Don't have mobiles or other toys tied onto or across the crib. Take all stuffed animals, toys, and books out of the crib at nap time. Leave absolutely no loose objects in the crib while the child is sleeping. North Carolina Child Care Licensing regulates that sleep checks be performed and documented for each individual infant 12 months and under. Sleep documentation should include the child's name, the date and time of each sleep check, and the sleep position at the time of each check, back, side, or tummy. These checks should be performed in a timely manner, and these checks are intended to help you keep children safe during nap time. Be sure to always maintain ratios, even during nap time. Caregivers are responsible for the needs of children in their care. This means that they must be supervised at all times. Someone must always be watching each child. They must never be left alone. Appropriate supervision is important to be able to meet the physical, social, cognitive, and emotional needs of children. You can only provide this kind of intensive care with a low staff-child ratio. It is very important that each adult cares for just a small number of children. Then you are able to provide safe and suitable care to meet each child's individual needs. Before we talk about playground safety, stop this video again for a time and use your workbook to think and create a list of things that you think are important for outside supervision. Some answers that you probably had were to take needed supplies outside to prevent having to go inside, such as an emergency kit, a cell phone, tissues, and perhaps wipes. You might also want to plan for toileting needs prior to going outside. And of course, be sure that ratios can be maintained. What else should we do to help create a secure outdoor environment? We have to set up the outdoor area so that it is challenging but safe. Children need and thrive on outdoor play to use and practice their motor skills. Provide a variety of materials, equipment, and structures for climbing, riding, pushing, and digging. Convenient outside storage will save time for caregivers and will help improve the supervision of children. The outdoor play area should directly connect to the indoor area if possible. Use durable fencing that is at least 4 feet high to provide a safe space for play. Take special precautions when your outside play area is shared with others. A separate play area is best for children under the age of 2. Every day you should thoroughly check for debris and broken equipment before your children go out to play. Look for broken glass, stones, sharp objects, standing water, poisonous plants, brush or high grass, and ice or snow accumulations. No animals should be in areas where children are playing. When you find a hazard, close the play area until the problem is fixed. Be very aware to protect children from water hazards. Children can be at risk of drowning when they are left unsupervised near even small amounts of water. If there are outdoor swimming pools, creeks, ponds, puddles, or tubs for water play, be extra cautious. Keep children away from water except with careful adult supervision. When they play under a sprinkler, watch out for large puddles and for children running and slipping. With any kind of water play, make sure the water is clean and watch the children closely. Empty the water containers immediately after use and be sure to clean and sanitize them. Next, be sure to establish safety and supervision procedures for taking children outside. Many helping hands are needed when preparing for the weather, putting on hats, coats, gloves, and shoes. Many watchful eyes are also needed at this time because children get excited. Some may run ahead of others. Getting children ready to go in strollers takes time. This is a transition time where supervision accidents are at a high risk. So much will be happening. Preparing to go outside is a time for careful help, guidance, and supervision by the caregivers. Once everyone is outside, an important reminder that supervision does not end. Remain vigilant and aware of each and every child. Your location on the playground is important so that you can continue to have eyes on the children. The teacher pictured here has selected the wrong location to supervise this playground. She cannot see the children at play behind her, nor can she see the children playing on the far side of the composite structure located in front of her. Your field of vision should not exceed 180 degrees. Make sure that one piece of play equipment does not block your view of others. So this would be the wrong location to stand on the playground. Compare the teacher's positioning presented here to the previous slide. These teachers, located on the outside of the play area, have fields of vision that do not exceed 180 degrees. They are also able to locate themselves near high use or potentially dangerous areas, such as the swings. A final thought may be that if more than one teacher is on the playground, have them rotate positions at least once during the play period. This would be the correct way to position yourselves on a playground. Whenever the daily routine involves the transportation of children, supervision of the children should be on high alert. Remember the story in the beginning about the child left on the bus? Other stories we hear involve children being left behind during field trips. Unfortunately, stories like this are reported way too often. Be sure to consider how best to protect your children, yourself, and your facility during transportation. Consider the following. How many adults will be needed to have a safe field trip? Of course, you should look at licensing regulations on staff ratios. These are the minimum requirements for transportation as well, but always consider whether the normal ratios will be sufficient. It may not be adequate to provide safe supervision away from the facility. Should you add additional adults to help with supervision? You will also have to consider that staff will need to have CPR and first aid certification. This applies to both for the children being transported as well as for any children left behind at the facility. Utilizing necessary forms should be a standard safety practice when it comes to transporting children. The first form that should be used for field trips is a master staffing pattern. This form should be carried by the trip leader and a copy should be left behind at the center. This form gives a full picture of staffing assignments, vehicle assignments, and drivers. It lists the adults on each vehicle, indicating who is CPR and first aid certified. It lists the children assigned to that vehicle and that adult. It also notes any child who would be regarded as medical alert, an asthmatic, a diabetic, an epileptic, etc. And it notes any child who will need medication administered. A big reminder to check attendance frequently by name and face. The next form, also for field trip use, is the group attendance roster. These are to be carried by individual group leaders. It is similar to the master staffing pattern form, but it lists just one group of children with an adult leader, the one who carries the form. Of course, the trip leader may carry copies of these forms for each group on the trip to help create the master list. Note that this form lists emergency information for quick reference by the adult group leader. A side note, though, that this does not replace individual emergency information forms that must still be carried for each child. It is for quick reference. And once again, attendance checks should be done regularly, using both name and face. This next form is the daily transportation roster. It is used for routine daily transportation plans, such as drop-off and pick-up at home or at school. Note that there are places for the children's names and multiple places for marking whether a child has been picked up, dropped off, did not ride the bus today, or not received at home. I can't stress enough the importance of the driver and monitor both being accountable for children at all points of pickup and delivery to and from the facility, the school, or the home. As we finish discussing the use of forms when transporting children, please remember the key point. The use of forms helps to plan and organize safe trips. Just as supervision is important in the classroom and on the playground, it is equally important that you provide appropriate adult supervision on vehicles. Best practice is that regardless of the regulated ratio, at least 2 adults should be in each vehicle, the driver and a monitor. It is also best practice for the monitor to ride in the back of the vehicle in order to see what is happening from the back to the front of the vehicle. The monitor keeps the roster, checks the children on and off, remember, by name and face. And strictly follow pickup and delivery procedures. Keep a copy of those procedures in the vehicle. Any variation in regular procedure can cause a lapse of supervision and unwanted accidents. Always be sure to load and unload children away from traffic and be careful to watch for traffic. Let's look at some onboard footage of a bus picking up children at their stop. This is a true accounting of what happened and was well documented on news and social media at the time of its happening. It is unimaginable that this could happen, yet it did, and luckily this time no children were hurt. Make it a point to be aware. Other vehicle considerations. A reminder that each vehicle needs at least one adult trained in CPR and first aid. A part of your supervisory duties is to be aware of when a child might be in medical distress and may need your immediate response. It should go without saying that children are never to be left unattended on a vehicle. And an important note is that it is the driver's responsibility to always make the last physical check of the entire vehicle to be sure all children have exited. This is a corner that should never be cut. So as we summarize this session, let's touch on some final teacher responsibilities. Know the children you are responsible for. Forget placing the responsibility on anyone else. If the children are in your care, take responsibility for them. Keep track of the comings and goings of the children. Foresee problems before they occur and make appropriate adaptations. Visual supervision at all times. Prepare for times when it is the hardest to keep track of children, such as transition times, arrival and departure, diaper changing, toileting, field trips. And a final reminder that should be taken quite seriously, name-to-face recognition. Don't just count heads. Their heads are constantly moving. You can use a simple checkoff sheet to count by name and face. 3 important rules of supervision. Number 1, visually supervise the children at all times. Number 2, take attendance at regular intervals, including each transition point, checking both name and face. And number 3, physically inspect. Leaving a child unsupervised is extremely dangerous. Please remember that supervision consists of 2 words, super and vision. Thank you for joining us today.